Welcome to Your Yes Filled Life. I'm Brenda Winkle, energetic leadership guide, psychic medium, and somatic coach for ambitious leaders who know their gifts are real and who want to stand fully in them. Here, you'll learn how to trust your intuition, embody your vision, and step into the freedom you've been craving, all without chasing more certifications or carrying stuff that does not belong to you. Every week, I'll share powerful practices and conversations with thought leaders and changemakers that help you transform your vision into embodied confidence, claim your gifts without apology, and lead with both clarity and freedom. Because your gifts aren't cute, they're powerful, they're real, and they're needed. Start today by downloading my free energy audit at brendawinkle.com/audit. It's the exact tool I use to track what's fueling me and what's draining me. It will help you discern between that hit of achievement and true joy so that you can lead with more clarity and impact. This is your space to stop proving, start embodying, and live fully in your gifts. Welcome to Your Yes-Filled Life. Hello, and welcome to Your Yes-Filled Life. I'm your host, Brenda Winkle. If you have recently started honoring yourself in a whole new way, and it's feeling really good and also uncomfortable, this episode is for you because this has come up in multiple client calls over the week. And so I know there's something here. And there's this little wondering, and I think the most simple way to phrase it is there's a worry that you're either becoming selfish, difficult, too much, or stubborn when you begin to really self-honor. And we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about why it feels that way and what to do about it. So I want to tell you about a conversation I had recently with one of my clients. She came into our coaching session worried because she was really honoring herself. And then she said that she felt defensive every single time that she got ready to self-honor. And then there was a challenge that she needed to work through in order to honor herself. She felt defensive and worried that she was going to be difficult or that she was just being stubborn. In fact, she asked me, am I becoming selfish? And she's not. That's just not how she's wired. And my guess is if that story resonated with you, you're not selfish either. The people who are worried about being selfish are almost never the people who are selfish because the idea that you would have the presence of mind to even inquire, am I selfish, tells me probably not. But for those of us that are empaths, it feels like we're being selfish because so much of our life has been sending our signal outward. We're reading the room, we're taking the temperature. And so when we begin to check in with ourselves first, whether it's to trust the huge idea that just arrived or to say, I need a little bit more spaciousness at the end of my workday, or whether it's to say, I'm really struggling feeling like this sandwich between kids and aging parents. Whatever the case is for you, it's not selfishness. It's not being difficult. It's definitely not being too much. The thing that's happening is you're finally noticing yourself. And that's where today's conversation is going to start. So when you've spent years making sure that everyone else's experience matters, perhaps more than yours, in fact, likely more than yours, including yourself feels really uncomfortable. And one of the things that begins to shift as you include yourself in your own equation is you no longer have the capacity to over caretake other people. It's possible that you have been previously very involved, perhaps overly involved in other people's experiences because as an empath who was not putting herself or himself on the list, you had the time and bandwidth. And now that you're putting yourself on the list, there's a few things that begin to happen. One is when you're actually taking care of you and you're noticing what you need, whether it's time after work, more water, a nap, whatever that is, you don't have as much capacity to take care of other people that don't actually need your care. Now, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because it's important. There's a difference between deciding to let a grown up take care of themselves and have the dignity of their own experience. And then there's the responsibility that comes with raising minor children. Now, if you still have a kid at home that is under 18, that's a little different. They really do rely on you to caretake in some ways, but even that older child, teenager can begin to have some self sufficiency. In fact, I think it could be argued that they need to develop some self sufficiency so that they can flourish in a way without so much shock when they get to age 18 and then begin to adult. So it's not quite such a big jar. But if for most of your life you have been sending this signal outward and you've been caring for people whether or not they wanted you to. And you've been doing it almost more than you've been taking care of yourself. It does feel like the ratio of attention you're paying to yourself really changes. That's actually a good thing. And you'll find that a lot of your relationships shift and change in positive ways because you're giving people in your life the dignity of their own experience. And when you begin to really prioritize yourself, sometimes it just feels so unfamiliar to notice what you need that it feels like suddenly you have a lot of needs. But my bet would be you don't have any more needs than anyone else in your family. In fact, if you stacked the needs that you know your family members have or your team members have against the needs that you're now honoring, I bet your list is still shorter. I really do. And some examples of this might be that it's just uncomfortable and new. So you're learning to say no. You're learning to say to people, I really care about you and I value you, and you're not meeting our agreed upon expectations. Or maybe it's that you're leaving the party early. That happened for me this week when I left a party at my friend's house who had hosted a rock painting party. I told you about that in an email. And if you're not on my email list, I tell a lot of stories on my email list. I invite you to come over and join me. Go download the energy audit, and then that'll pop you right on my email list. And then you'll have the energy audit, which, by the way, is how I knew it was time for me to leave that friend's party. Because when I checked in with myself and I checked in with my energy, I realized I was tired. And so I left a rock painting party before the party was over to go take care of myself. And we even had a conversation about, this is the work of an empath because the hostess was also an empath. And so she didn't mind, and the other ladies didn't mind either. And it was a lovely party. And I put my rocks on social media. I think I need to put the pictures of them there. I think they might be in a reel. At any rate, I digress. The point is, when you start to make these changes, it does feel unfamiliar. And it's just like any new habit that you really pay attention to it at first. It takes up a lot of your emotional and psychological and cognitive bandwidth when you're doing something new. And this is going to affect you whether it's saying no, whether it's trusting the intuitive idea of what to do, or whether it's the knowing that you need to take some space and go to your mountain house for a little bit, or whether it's totally, completely trusting that you really do want to own two homes in two different states, whatever the case may be for you. Or maybe you get the download that all of a sudden changes everything on your work. and you found a way to streamline the last 10 or 15 years of your work into an incredibly potent place that's going to change millions of lives. Whatever that is, trust that you actually do know. And, like today is Saturday. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're probably like, hey, did you get a haircut? Did you change your hair? No. I took a nap and I crunched my curls a little bit on one side. And I thought to myself, well, I could record this later, but I feel like I want to talk to you now. So I'm going to record, even though I have like a little uneven curl because I took a nap, because my energy was depleted. And it feels like you're becoming selfish because your nervous system's learned when everyone else is okay, when everyone else is content, I'm content. And a lot of times that was enough for us because of various reasons, but especially the empath piece. And so as you begin to notice what you need and give yourself those necessary things and you stop prioritizing everyone else, sometimes two things can happen. So your nervous system is a really important part of you. We all have a nervous system, and your nervous system has one primary job, and that's to keep you alive. Now, it does some other nuanced things like manage your heart rate, manage your digestion, helps you to release hormones at certain times, all those kinds of things. And then your brain and your nervous system are working together to make sure that you're safe. And as long as things are pretty status quo, things are going to work well. Your nervous system will not send any signals to the body or the brain that there's anything in, your nervous system won't send any signals to the brain or the body that there's any danger. And so, a lot of times, as long as there is relatively low stress, things go well. But the minute your body, your nervous system experiences a little bit of stress, things begin to shift and change. So, let's say, for example, that for your entire life up till this point, you have always prioritized how other people feel, even when it wasn't the right thing to do, even when it cost you big time to do. Like, let's say if you own a practice and you have people that work for you in your practice, and one of them is a lovely human being and they do a great job, except lately there's been a problem with their attendance, and you need to address that. So, old you would have probably found ways to leave notes. Maybe you would have engaged in passive aggressive behavior. Maybe you would have asked other people to have conversations. Maybe you would have sent out an email to the entire clinic about attendance. But now that you are on this journey to really claim your own power as an empath, you want to have a conversation. So the want to is there. The cognitive awareness that you need to do that is there. And then as you begin to even think about the script that you're going to say to the person who has an attendance problem, you begin to feel tension and stress. And what's happening is the nervous system has identified a potential threat because this is new. Not only is it new, but it's really different. And it might require a little bit of conflict. And so the nervous system sends out signals to the brain and the body that, oh, hey, we have a little danger here. And so you might notice heart palpitations, you might notice sweaty palms. And as long as you can keep the stress below what we call the window of tolerance in the nervous system world, the window of tolerance is the place where you're experiencing stress but you're not in an activated stress response. So a little bit of stress is a good thing. It's what gives you the ideas. It's what gets you up and going in the morning. It's what helps you complete things like, your dishes or your work. But when we cross that threshold and we go outside of the window of tolerance, now the nervous system is going to put the body in a stress response because we have to deal with a threat. And the threat is probably a threat to our lives, even though it may not actually be a threat to our lives. It may be the conversation with the team member whose attendance has been poor. Okay, so depending on how you're wired and depending on what else has been happening and what your baseline stress level is, your body is going to send the signal to either put you into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now, this happens whether or not you're an empath. Whether or not you're an empath, if you're in fight, you're going to either overschedule, overwork, over talk. You might be combative. You might feel irritated. If you're in flight, you might avoid. You might procrastinate. You might find 43 other things to do. You might actually leave. If you're in freeze, you might not be able to remember a single thing you wanted to say. In fact, you may not even be able to go to work that day because you're just so tired. And suddenly you have this random nondescript illness that's going to keep you from going to work. And if you're in fawn, you're not going to be able to say your script even though you rehearsed it. You're going to come up with something that is going to come out of your mouth that's going to be like, yeah, it's okay, you were late again. And then inwardly, you're like, what? It's not okay. Those are the stress responses at work. We all have them. This happens to every single one of us. So over time, the work is that we work with the nervous system to increase the window of tolerance. Now, as an empath, and this is really, really important, over time, as we increase the window of tolerance with our nervous system regulation, we also can increase our own capacity to sit in the discomfort of someone else not liking what we have to say, not approving of what we're doing, and maybe even gasp, disagreeing with us. We develop a capacity for that. And that capacity feels a lot like freedom, but it also feels very subversive. It feels like, oh my gosh, I think I'm selfish. I think I'm being difficult. If we are willing to do the work and we keep going and we keep regulating the nervous system and working with the body and working with the nervous system and working with our patterns and recognizing how we're showing up for ourselves, then it is going to get better over time. It does take time and practice, which is a big part of the reason that Power, my program, Self Trust for Empaths, is a year-long program that has on times and then off times to integrate, to practice, because this work does take practice. But the thing is, if we don't address the stress in the body, if we don't expand our window of tolerance and we notice a stress response, and then we don't ever challenge that stress response in our own body or we try to work with it. And instead, we just are like, okay, whatever. I'm not going to be able to have that conversation with that team member, or I'm not going to be able to have that conversation with my partner, or maybe I'll just let them do that again. I just don't have capacity to tell them. What happens over time is you develop a little resentment, and a little resentment will almost always fester and it turns into a bigger resentment. And I have found that resentment has an accumulative effect where the longer you've had the resentment, the bigger it feels. And I've talked about this before, and I didn't realize that this was a new way of thinking, but it is because several people have asked me about this. They're like, wait, say that again. So I'm going to say it to you again. The flip side of resentment is entitlement. And here's how it works. If you are doing things and feel very resentful, that you're taking on so much, that you're asked to hold so much, it is very common for the same people who are overgiving, they're incredibly generous to their own detriment, and they're so caring and so empathic to also become incredibly entitled. And the way it works is there's a little part of you that says, I have given so much to them that now I deserve this. The only problem is you don't ever discuss what the this is. And a lot of times it comes across as taking without permission or rudeness or just plain entitlement. And of course you feel entitled because you feel so much resentment. They're two sides of the same coin. And when I say resentment does not come without harm, this is what I'm talking about. I've felt this in my own body and I've witnessed this in people that I love that have resentment that's built up over time. The entitlement is incredible. And here's the thing I really want you to understand: the entitlement does not reflect back to the people that you have been overgiving to. It would be a lot cleaner and more simple if it did, but that's not how it works. So let's say you're beginning to feel resentment for the amount that you're carrying for your family. And then when you show up at the movie theater, you feel entitled to cut in front of all the people in line because you have held so much for so many people that they just need to move out of the way. Now, that is a weird example. Maybe it's not a movie theater, but I think you get the point. If you've ever felt yourself and you're an empath and you're very compassionate and very kind, and then you do these things that are like pushing to the front of the line or acting like you're owed something from somebody else, and you're like, where is this coming from? This is where it's coming from. Resentment and entitlement are two sides of the same coin. So, questions to ask yourself as you're noticing resentment, because most empaths do have a level of resentment. What is the resentment trying to protect? So, if you were to release the resentment, what would that mean? And when I say release the resentment, I don't just mean that you can like push a valve. That would be cool if it was true, but that's not how that works. In order to reduce resentment, we have to flip some behaviors. And a lot of times, resentment builds up over time because there is a lack of reciprocity. There's more energy put in by someone else, or there are hurts that are not cleanly discussed and then solved. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a discussion that says, I'm feeling a way about this. There's a cycle that's called the rupture repair cycle. And what that talks about is when there's a hurt feeling, there's actually a closeness that comes when you talk about it and you get to the bottom of it. The rupture repair cycle. If you don't repair the rupture, other things happen within the relationship and then within resentment slash entitlement. So, invitation to ask yourself, what needs have I been ignoring? And what nudges have I been ignoring? And where have I stopped making myself part of the equation? And then if you haven't yet gone to download the energy audit, I'm going to really highly recommend you do that here, because the energy audit is something that you can use it one time. I use it at least weekly. And I often use it more than weekly because I'm a very strong empath and I'm very self aware. I've been practicing this for a long time, and stuff still sneaks up on me. And so, like today, for example, I noticed that I was feeling really activated and irritated when my dog Bentley was barking. Now, he barks. I mean, he's a dog, he barks. It's not typical for me to be irritated. And then I noticed that when my daughter called me on her way to work, that I had a flash of anger about something. And I put those two things together and I was like, okay, both of these things are a little bit out of character for me. I'm not typically irritated and I'm not typically angry. What's actually happening for me? Well, I had gone dancing last night. And well, I had gone dancing 3 nights last week. I went dancing on Monday and Thursday for three classes and then Friday. And then Friday night was a dance class and then a dance social. And it was tropical night and it was really fun. I'll put some pictures up this week of that on my social channels, on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And so social night was tropical night. They had a live band that was for salsa and a little bit of bachata, a little bit of merengue and cumbia. And then they had a bachata room and then they had line dancing, which I didn't do. And anyway, I stayed out much later than I typically stay out on those social dance nights because I wanted to. And there was a demo, a show of a new, well, it's not new, it's new to me, called Casina Rueda. And I am obsessed with this dance. It's like a circle dance from Cuba. I believe it's from Cuba. And it's so fun, so fun. So I wanted to see that. Anyway, I stayed out too late. I was tired. I was crabby, like a little child. And it took me getting angry at my daughter and irritated at my dog for me to pause and then ask myself, what's actually happening here? And so I used the energy audit. I used the energy audit in October 2024 because I was traveling full time and I had been for about 7 months. And my intention was to continue traveling full time. My dad had died that August, and I just wasn't ready to put down roots. I wasn't ready to make a decision about where I wanted to live. And so I really thought I was going to keep traveling. Well, in between moving from two Airbnbs in the Portland area, I had a panic attack. And I don't have panic attacks. I haven't had panic attacks since I left my marriage in 2007. It's amazing how the panic attacks ended when that marriage ended, but that's another story. So when I had the panic attack in, well, I think it was October of 2024, I knew something was going on. But I didn't really understand what. And so I decided that I was going to write everything down on a piece of paper and I was going to really get clear about what was happening for me because what had I missed? And as I was charting my own energy, I began to talk to my clients about it. And my clients were like, ooh, we want that. And so I created the energy audit and I shared it with them. And they got such good results out of it that now I made it available for you. And I still use it and I tell my clients to use it. And if my clients come to me and they've been doing really well for a long time, and then suddenly there's a kink and things aren't going as well, the first thing I say to them is, number one, are you zipping up? And number two, let's do the energy audit. Let's figure out if there's something hidden that is irritating you or draining you, or if maybe there's just not enough fuel. I'm telling you, it is a game changer. So go grab that. It's at brendawinkle.com/audit, and I'll put the link in the show notes. So part of what happens as we work through all of these different kinds of changes, the evolution from putting ourselves on the list, the evolution from understanding how to work with our stress responses and widening our window of tolerance is an identity shift. Our identity has to shift in order for those things to actually take place. Because the old identity would be something like, I'm responsible for everyone else's experience. Or a version might be, I'm safer when everyone else is happy. And then the identity needs to shift to, my experience also matters. And that sounds simple, but it is massive. It's huge. And if we don't allow our identity to shift and we don't do the inner work, meaning the nervous system work and the reflection and monitoring the energy audit and getting some support, the identity doesn't shift. And when the identity doesn't shift, we don't make the change. So if you've been coming up against the same pattern, the same pattern, the same pattern, and you're like reading the books and you're listening to the podcasts and you're coming to my master classes and you're like, but I'm still doing the thing. This is why the identity hasn't shifted. And until the identity begins to shift, it's a little bit like spinning the wheels. And this is part of the work we do inside Power and why it lasts a year, because identity shifts don't happen overnight. would be cool if they did. It'd be cool if like I decided to go to the mall and I'm going to shift my identity. I'm going to buy all new clothes in a different style, but that's not how identity works. So, what does self-trust actually look like? Well, it's not dramatic exits. It's not perfect boundaries. It's not never disappointing anyone. In fact, self-trust looks like disappointing people a lot of the time. I remember reading the O magazine, and I remember this is embarrassing, but I'm just going to tell you. So, I used to read the magazine in the bathroom. And I remember I was sitting on top of the closed toilet lid because I was a single mom for, well, I mean, still technically I am, but I was, having a kid at home. And so sometimes I would take breaks in the bathroom and I would read my own magazine on the closed toilet lid. And there was this thing that Oprah had written that really inspired me and also bothered me a lot. And she said that she realized she had a choice to make. She could either disappoint herself or she could disappoint other people. And she chose other people. And I was like, I thought to myself, how in the world could you do that? I could never do that. It wouldn't be safe for me to do that. I would lose all the relationships in my life. I'd be totally alone. And with coming from a background of chaos and trauma and domestic violence, I really had some beliefs that kept me from doing that. So we've talked about in other episodes, you can go back and listen, the difference between a bioempath and a environmental empath. And both empaths are common, and a lot of people like me have both, where I'm a bioempath. I have the natural abilities as an empath, but then I have an environment that created CPTSD, and I needed to learn to be an empath as a way to keep myself safe. And so I have both. And that was part of the reason why that article by Oprah really hit me in the way, because I was like, how does one even do that? Well, like, what would happen if I started to disappoint everybody else? So if you're asking yourself that, just know you too can learn to disappoint other people. But a lot of times, self trust is more leaving when you're tired, ordering what you actually want on the menu, saying, not this time, but I'd like to go another time, or resting before you're tired, trusting your body. And I just would love to offer maybe nothing has gone wrong here. Maybe it's just you becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves. And I know you have people in your life who do not self-abandon. I know you have people in your life that are incredibly kind and generous and also honor themselves. And if you don't, then maybe you can follow me and lean on me. I was not always this way. I was not always self-honoring. In fact, the first 35 years for sure of my life, I was not self-honoring. I was the queen of the people pleasers because I needed to be. That was how I stayed safe. So this week, I have some things that I would love for you just to pay attention to and notice. Where are places in your life that you immediately assume you are selfish? And invitation to ask yourself, is that true? And I'd also love for you to pay attention to when, especially when you think you're selfish, could it be that you're actually honoring yourself? And I invite you to pay attention to where are you making other people's experiences matter more and not including your own. And then an invitation to ask yourself, what would change if my experience mattered too? So if today's episode felt like someone was describing your inner world, Power was created exactly for this stage. This is not a learning stage. You don't need a lot of information. You don't need to read more books. But what you need is a place to practice making your experience part of the equation again and again until self trust becomes your new normal. Enrollment for Power is open now for the summer cohort through July 7th, and we begin the summer cohort on July 9th. If this has been helpful for you, would you please consider sharing it with somebody you care about? And, this podcast is not free to produce, it's not free to host, and it would mean so much as a form of reciprocity if you could leave a comment, a rating, a review wherever you're listening. And please subscribe wherever you're listening. In the next few weeks, you're going to hear from Judith Orloff, who is considered the godmother of the empath movement. You're going to hear from some of my clients. You're going to hear from experts in various fields, including conflict resolution and leadership. And there's so much good stuff coming your way. So be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. Bye for now. Until next time.